Hello and welcome to Season 8, Episode 14 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop with a headache.
Yes, so we'll be in a lovely mood today. I'm also recovering from a cold of some sort, so if I sound congested, that's why. This is our season finale for Season 8, our last time reading George Lakoff's Moral Politics, How Liberals and Conservatives Think. And it's probably a good thing that this is our last time reading this, because we have had an absolutely miserable time with this book. But now we're discussing his final section, which is really when he just completely gives up on trying to even be any form of impartial, and is just explaining why everybody should be liberal, why everybody should raise their kids according to this nurturant parent model, and why the conservatives suck, in his opinion, which he's been alluding to not very, obtusely throughout this whole thing.
I disagree. He does not give up his pretenses. He is still holding them up high as his ideas.
That is true, yes.
Saying that he's just going to show us why he is right.
He's saying he's going to be very objective in this sort of thing.
Well,
the first chapter in this section, as I'm sure you're going to point out, is non-ideological reasons for being a liberal.
Yes.
So
what is the new word for this? Midwit? Ever heard that term?
I have.
Yeah, so he's a midwit.
Yes.
So he's just smart enough so that he thinks he's smarter than he is. Mm-hmm. And he fancies himself some sort of brilliant philosopher, I guess. He says, I try to put aside my own political views in doing this analysis. Mm-hmm. It's just insufferable. And it's hard to read because it's just so dishonest. Mm-hmm. I'd much rather read something that is just like, I'm a partisan liberal and I'm wonderful, and this is why I believe that I am right and you're wrong. And you just put it out there. But what he does is he tries to mask it as if this is some sort of rational decision on his part, when it's clearly is what he even kind of alludes to. He says he had these instinctual beliefs systems as a liberal, and now he's thought it all out, and by golly, turns out he was right all along.
Yeah,
he had very good instincts.
Yes, he's spent his whole time defining conservatism as the bad side, and so if your definition is this one's the bad side, and the side that I've already believed in is the good side, then naturally you're going to come to the conclusion after this research that your side is the right side, because the other one has been defined as the bad one.
He does just assert on this first page of this third paragraph, but I am not a moral relativist. I'm like, are you kidding me?
And he spends a lot of time, either in this section or one of the afterwards, he spends a lot of time talking about multiculturalism, which is moral relativism, essentially in a nutshell, like what they all believe is that everything is just relative and we should let all the cultures just get along in one big thing.
Yes. He says, I am a committed liberal, as I half-jokingly said, you should be committed. Some sort of dummy asylum.
That was a good one.
There should be a dummy asylum. There really should be. There shouldn't be, but it would be entertaining to have like timeouts. Mm-hmm. Like somebody who writes a book this stupid, we should be able to come to a consensus that they will not be able to speak publicly for like 6 months. Or write. Yeah.
Well, this was written back in like 1996, so it's been a little while. So
he keeps updating it. He keeps reissuing it, with these afterwards, which I refuse to read.
Yeah, I read through them.
I'm not one who thinks that we shouldn't read this or shouldn't read that. Like in my youth, I read Mein Kampf and what's another crazy book that people say are bad books or something. I mean, that was really just kind of a jumbled mess. I don't remember much of anything of it, but I thought, I'm going to read this, weird book. So I still have that kind of theory, is that you should always be open to new ideas, but it should be honest ideas, or they should be interesting, or they should be, even if they're just horrible, they're not this. This is just such a waste of time, print, and word. I don't know. Am I underemphasizing it? I feel like I am.
I mean, I think you're right. I mean, but I think if there is any, value to be gleaned from reading this stupid thing, I think it is I think, telling of a lot of these types of books in general, because I think this is what a lot of the left, and especially the academic type left, are very, very good at, is coming up with studies and writing very long books that seem like they're going to say a whole lot and seem like they're going to prove everything and set everything out in a coherent way. And then they're able to cite these things. Like I could very easily see, one of my professors at some point, saying, well, according to Lakoff, back in 1996, he did this whole big study and he looked at all these different, examples of current issues. And he really found that the conservative style of thinking is derived from this parenting model and it's just fundamentally flawed and you can't really reason with them. And they'd be able to cite this very easily. But if you actually read the thing, it really doesn't say much at all. And I think that is probably the case for a lot of similar books like this.
Yeah, probably. And also, I take it as a warning to myself to question my own belief system, because this guy clearly is not self-aware of how mediocre his writing and his thinking are, and he probably thinks he's brilliant. He probably made a lot of money off of this, and he's probably a very prominent person. I don't know, but I think it's a warning to the readers, like, oh gosh, do I fall into this trap too? Because I think we're all subject to it, so I shouldn't be too, you shouldn't condemn them too much, because I have the same tendencies to want to reaffirm what I already believe and think that, I've just made this rational decision and it's just the right thing.
Yeah. But then again, you also aren't writing 450-page books claiming that you are impartial and trying to instruct people on how impartial you are and how correct one side is.
I'm trying to make a larger point, Adam. And you're trying to feed my cynicism.
Yes. No,
when I'm trying to make a very pleasant, highbrow point of view, and give him some credit.
Yes,
I mean, in the sense that we're all human and we're all sinners.
Yes.
Now he wouldn't think that.
No,
because he's a moral relativist, even though he claims he is not.
Yes.
So what else? What do we want to talk about this? Non-ideological reasons for being liberal. So he says, I could say a bunch of these stupid comments that I have written.
Really.
He says, reason one. This is on 337. Yes. I'm sorry, I'm talking over you.
No, that's all right.
Reason one. So he's trying to say there are good reasons to choose liberalism. And if he's asking this, the list would be, reason one, the nurturant parent model is superior as a method of child rearing. Reason two, strict father morality requires a view of human thought that is at odds with what we know about the way the mind works. And reason three, strict father morality often finds morality in harm. Nurturant parent morality does not. So number one is conservatives abuse their children. Mm-hmm. Number two is conservatives are crazy. Mm-hmm. And number three is that conservatives are evil.
Yes. No, I think those are very good reasons. But that's just how he sets up these next few chapters here. To quickly summarize, I don't know how many points you have about this next chapter, but to quickly summarize this next
raising
one,
real children? Raising real children.
Yes.
Real children. Not the fake ones.
Yes, not fake
real ones.
Real children, yes.
He's fundamentalist Christians
abuse their children.
Raising unreal children.
Yes, they're fake, they're imaginary or something like that. But essentially his point is like those four parenting styles, which I heard, at least something about, back in school. I don't know how familiar you are, maybe the listener is, but the four styles are what? Authoritarian, authoritative, the indulgent, permissive, and then negligent. And what he claims is that the strict father morality is the authoritarian, whereas the nurturant parent is the authoritative.
What?
And so this is really something he should have set out from the very beginning, because this is really when he tries to connect these models to actual things that people believe, which he didn't do in the beginning. He just kind of asserted these things. And the way he does that is he pulls out these examples.
Of course, he has to drop both of them down a measure on the four topic scale.
What do you mean?
So really the strict parent model is the not the authoritarian, but the authoritative.
Oh, yes.
And then the nurturant parent is actually two down below, which is the negligent parent.
Yeah. Negligent or permissive.
Yes, correct. Anyway, go ahead. I apologize. I interrupted you.
But he pulls examples from these Christian child rearing books, is what he calls them. I'd never heard of any of these people, and he's writing back in the 90s, so maybe I wouldn't.
Yes. Yeah, so we already talked about James Dobson, A Focus
Yes.
on the Family. So he's an elderly person now. I looked him up earlier today. And he was, I don't know, how do I translate him to the modern day? He's like a mega church preacher. Not Joel Osteen, a little bit more cerebral, and he wrote more. So I don't want to say bad things about him, but he was a trained psychiatrist or psychologist or something like that. Not really a minister, but he did write some books, and he was somewhat influential, but like in a poppy cultural way.
Yeah.
And then he mentions Brower, wasn't that his name? Bauer. Who was actually a candidate for president. Where is he at? I thought I saw him somewhere.
He's not in this list of the child.
Oh, he did
authors.
too. He listed him as an author, and
I mean, not in the list at the very beginning. He's probably in here somewhere. I'm not
later.
doubting you.
But he was also a focus on the family, and he was with a different political Christian group, and he ran for president. He was a politician, and he was masking himself with this. Oh yeah, Gary Bowers, Family Research Council. He mentions him on 348. So he was like more of a politician. He's a little guy, a little short guy, and he ran for president in 2000. So that would have been when George W. was running. And there's a big field of candidates, and I don't know if he had a step stool for him or not, but he was not a serious, influential thinker. I mean, he had like this little following, and he had a bunch of money behind him. But it was kind of like a shorter, less charismatic Mike Huckabee. You know, like Huckabee was always like evangelical type politician. Same kind of thing where you have this kind of like they have different lanes that they talk about. Like you try to focus on a lane of voters in the Iowa primary, and he was trying to get those evangelical type people. But he was never influential. He was never thought of as a great thinker, and as far as I can tell. And I have never heard of these other authors either, but perhaps they were very prominent in some fashion. But, when you're talking about mainstream Christian conservative child rearing experts, he doesn't mention, I don't think he mentions anywhere in this book. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was there any Catholics mentioned in this book?
He mentions them briefly. I don't know about
the
specific names.
Social justice theory.
Social justice.
Was the
he
only
talks
thing,
about,
as an exception to some other
and
theory.
he mentions, like, as an aside, he thinks all Catholics are liberals, because he mentions as an aside,
Right.
liberals, Catholics accepted, are, in favor of abortion. That's like one of the only mentions that he has in there.
Right. But I mean, like there are a lot of mainstream thinkers. Now, maybe it's more prominent now philosophically, I think back at it. There's always been a very strong intellectual tradition in America for Catholic religiosity and family issues. Pope John Paul II was not an unknown figure when this guy was writing this book, talking about raising families and life and how to be a good parent and all that kind of stuff. None of that is cited. So all the mainstream conservatives, he doesn't like to cite them. He likes to cite these. I don't want to criticize them too much because I don't know too much about some of them, but it's more like this pop culture-y type boogeyman.
Well, he's definitely cherry-picked quotes because the point he's trying to make is that, all Christians, all these conservatives must believe that the only course for parenting is to make sure your children don't talk back and don't disrespect you, and if they do, then they get corporally punished. Because he picks out quotes, he says, what am I looking at here? I don't know. The spanking should be administered firmly. That's one of the quotes he pulls out here. When youngsters display stiff-necked rebellion, you must be willing to respond to the challenge immediately. Stuff like that, where it's all about, just a butting of heads. You have to be very firm with your children. He's trying to make the argument this is what, conservatives must believe. They're the strict father of morality. This is something he should have brought up in chapter 2, if you really want to make this point, because he never really connected it originally. Correct. And his overarching point is that this is the authoritarian model, which says that it's like the child just must respect the parent's authority and that's it.
Yes.
Compared to the authoritative, which is that you tell them the difference between right and wrong, and you use sort of a system of reward and punishment, not so much as strong as like the corporal punishment, but you guide these children in the right direction. And that's what he argues is the nurturant parent.
Right, which
completely
is
different from what he described earlier about pursuing the child's happiness and making sure that they're content and cared for and stuff like that, which is much more the permissive style, which he bashes.
Yes.
But essentially his whole point is, there have been studies on these 4-parent models, and the authoritative is the only one that is really good and has produced good results.
Yes.
The authoritarian leads to angry children and lashing out, and so does the negligent, and so does the permissive. But the authoritative is good, and because he's trying to define that as the nurturant parent, therefore the liberals are right about this because that's the appropriate form of child rearing.
Right, and it's just dishonest.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is, this entire argument on those 4 subject areas supports a Christian conservative view of parenting, and he doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And he talks about, well, experts say this and experts say that. And he doesn't do a whole lot of citing.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, it's not supposed to be an academic book.
Well, I think it is.
I don't think it is. You think it is?
It's published by the University of Chicago.
Yeah,
this is supposed to be an academic book. Oh,
Really?
I think absolutely.
You got to be kidding me.
I think this was intended to be an academic book. Well, he has a whole list of references at the back that he very infrequently refers to.
Really, I thought this was like paperback pulp fiction.
Oh no, I think this is meant to be an academic work.
For real?
That's like all of his stuff.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's just now dawned on me on page 364 that he's trying to be serious about this.
I think it is. I don't think this is supposed to be Pulp Fiction because he has some renown, like as a linguist.
He should have been fired over this thing.
Yeah,
I mean, really. I mean,
so,
it's just
he's
so
not really
dishonest.
cited. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Could you imagine being his boss? And he publishes this thing, and I have a great academic paper. No, it's not.
Yeah. Well, I think he was probably the head of his department at this time. He was a professor at University of California, Berkeley.
Well, yeah.
And I don't know exactly for how long. But
Do you ever see the video? I'm going off a tangent.
That's all right.
Of Ronald Reagan when he was governor of California dealing with the protesters at Berkeley? You've probably never seen the angry Ronald Reagan. Look up the listener right now. Google Ronald Reagan yelling at protesters at University of Berkeley, and he was just screaming at him.
Yeah.
That's back when he was a much younger man. He softened in his later years, but it's entertaining because Berkeley's always been crazy.
Yeah,
and it's just getting crazier and crazier. Mm-hmm. And now it's this weird authoritarian, left wing authoritarian commie. It always ends up going that way anyway. Yeah. All right, sorry to go off that tangent. Because you mentioned Berkeley, I was thinking about Reagan the other day.
That's good.
Angry Reagan is like the best Reagan. I mean, it's the most entertaining videos. I mean, there's funny Reagan because he's very, has the jokes. He always mentioned jokes because he's a funny joker.
Yeah.
Especially about the Russians. Mm-hmm. He made a lot of good jokes about the Russians. But anyway, angry Reagan was entertaining.
I bet I'll have to look it up.
Well, he was very much an intellectual. Reagan. Mm-hmm. He was a writer, and he had a radio show that he had. You know this, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind.
Well, no, you can keep telling it. I'm sure the listener would be interested.
No, I don't know. Maybe it's common knowledge. I mean, it was before my time, really, because he.
He started out as an actor.
Well, yeah. Bonzo Goes to Washington or whatever. He acted with monkeys.
Did he?
Yeah,
is that right?
Yeah. There was a Bonzo or Gonzo. Yeah, he had a couple movies with a little chimpanzee.
Huh.
Yeah,
he was monkeys.
He was not. Is a chimpanzee a monkey? I think so. Anyway, he was not a great actor. Yeah. He was like he had some B movie actor, I guess you'd say. And then he was head of the Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah,
the union. And then that's back before they were all crazy. Mm-hmm. And then he ended up getting into politics more directly and became governor of California.
Yeah, I heard that the reason he got into politics was because of the Screen Actors Guild, because he saw a lot of the weirdo like communist factions in there with the Hollywood people and how influential they were. He's like, I don't agree with these people.
Yes.
But there you go, some Ronald Reagan trivia for you.
Won every state but Minnesota on his re-election at 84. It can happen again. Maybe this year. Who knows?
We'll see. I don't know what else to say about the Raising Real Children chapter.
I think we said enough on that. The human mind, which is the conservatives are crazy. So he says...
This one was wild.
Can I just read this introduction to this? Absolutely. This is 3 lines. Strict father morality is not just out of touch with the realities of raising children. It has a problem that goes even deeper. It is out of touch with the realities of the human mind. Because they're crazy. I don't know. I read through this. I'm just like, it's just exhausting.
Yeah.
What do you want to What do you want to say about this?
Well, I mean, his main argument here is that strict father morality says that there has to be absolute rules. And then what he tries to say is that the human mind just doesn't comprehend absolute rules. We always find exceptions. There's always gray areas to things. Everything's sort of situational. But all of his arguments here don't really, necessarily, disprove an objective set of rules. Because he says things could have gray areas. Well, sure, but that still means that there must be some objective good that we know must be happening for there to be a gray area. We know that we're straying away from it and maybe into other territory. So there's definitely a line. We're just kind of moving away from it and sort of bordering between a couple lines there, if that makes sense. But he's kind of saying these things as if we can't have a rule for absolutely everything, but that doesn't deny that there can be an absolute good for something. But that's what he says, and so therefore, conservatives are crazy.
Yeah, I do like at the very end of this chapter, he asserts some inappropriate thoughts about genderism. In our new day and age about gender fluidity and stuff. He says, women have known throughout history that nurturance is a way of life. I guess all women?
I guess so, all of them, intrinsically.
Yes. And the exception proves the rule, I guess, because the exception would be the cold-blooded sociopathic murderers among the women, because there are some. Yeah. But I don't know why. What is this even talking about?
I don't know.
Because he has to deal with this concept that the nurturant parent model is feminine or female, right? And he keeps alluding to that,
yes,
but he won't say it. I mean, he says it kind of, but he won't say it because he wants to say men can be nurturant too, but maybe society is making them not do it, or But then he says stuff like this, where he just makes a categorical statement about women. Women have known throughout history that nurturance is a way of life. What does that even mean? I mean, in this context, what is he even talking about, and why does he even mention that?
Yeah,
other than to try to get the support of his female readers, I guess, or I don't know.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Well, one of my favorite parts of this chapter is he goes through and he says, we frame things differently, we categorize differently, we can't have objective truth here. There's differences, there's difficulties with imperfect communication, therefore we can't even pass on rules properly because we can never be too specific. And then he has this section on relativism.
Yeah, one paragraph, really.
Yeah, but he says, does a failure of moral absolutism mean total moral relativism? Not at all. More than the failure of conceptual absolutism means total conceptual relativism. And then he goes on to say, talking about these metaphors, that they are all strongly constrained by what morality is fundamentally about, promoting human well-being, etc. They're constrained by various aspects of our biology and our experience functioning in the physical and social world. So he acknowledges that there are absolute constraints on morality.
Yes.
So he spends all this time saying, well, we don't really have any absolute constraints on morality. We can never really box things in. And he says, well, I don't really want to be a relativist, and I know that there are things that I truly believe 100%. It's that exact thing that we had with last season, where we had the relativist character kind of coming to the realization. Well, no, there's definitely some things that I believe are absolutely right and wrong. And it's almost like he's having that as he's writing, and he has to argue against being a relativist because he knows that there are absolutes in there. After he spent this whole chapter trying to say, well, we don't really have any absolutes, therefore they're all crazy.
Yes.
But he has absolutes. He has firm boundaries.
They always do.
Yes.
They always do, and they don't, I mean, this moral relativists always are more absolutist than absolutists. I know that may sound stupid.
Yes.
Or contradictory, but when you peel it back a little bit, they have more categorical rules that they will follow and enforce than any other belief system because they have their own sense of morality. They just couch it in terms of I'm not judgmental. Okay, well, what do you think about Trump? Trump and all these people are evil. Orange man bad and all that kind of stuff. Or you could say, what about abortion? That's like a religious tenet.
Yeah.
You go down the list and there's so many more. Because like even, and it's so funny because the one thing that's really wild about, well, Christianity in particular, is that there's a set of do's and don'ts, rights and wrongs that is somewhat inflexible, really. I mean, there's some things that it's just like, no. But there's one categorical that seems to have no exceptions, which I think we all struggle with in some ways. And that all of it can be forgiven. Mm-hmm. And it just really changes the entire nature of an absolutist philosophy that, yeah, it's wrong, but if you're truly remorseful, you could be forgiven no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, like Stalin at his deathbed when they poisoned him or whatever, in theory, he might have repented. Mm-hmm. He might be in heaven.
Yeah.
You know? And then I'm like risking going to hell thinking that's a bad deal. You know what I'm saying? It's such a wild concept, but it's also moderating on the practice, a day-to-day practice of parenting and of life and of a political belief system. You have that moderating influence of knowing, number one, we're all imperfect, we're all sinners. And then two, every one of us can be forgiven. So you know that jackass political opponent of yours, if that person has done terrible things to you, at some point, if they've asked for forgiveness, and of course they should make amends to the individuals they've wronged, but if they come out and they come back and they say, "I'm sorry, will you forgive me?" You're supposed to forgive them.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a fundamental precept of Christian morality, and of course, that type of love, you'd say, of your neighbor is even more intense with your children. So when you talk about this authoritarian philosophy, it's if it's going to be Christian, it has to be tempered with the ready forgiveness of a parent for a child that does them wrong, which has to be there, or else it's not Christian.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So so he doesn't acknowledge or even mention that, and that's a fundamental. Like I said, a moderating. It's like putting brakes on the judgmental nature of the religion, which says there's some things that are right, there's some things that are wrong. Period. But if you do the wrong, God might forgive you anyway. And so it's he just doesn't understand. He doesn't understand what the philosophy is. He doesn't care, and that's why I think that's what really aggravates me is that he's dishonest about it.
Yes. Speaking of, in this next chapter called Basic Humanity, which is about why conservatives are evil, the second sentence here. All of Judeo-Christian morality requires the metaphor of moral accounting, which is, blah, blah, blah. Well-being is wealth.
The moral
we
debts.
pay. It's like, that idea that we're just, indebted to God or something like that when we sin.
There's a ledger. There's a ledger that God is keeping. And if you're, the scales tip one way, hell, scales tip one way, heaven, which is just the opposite of what I just articulated.
Yes. And essentially his argument here is that the core of the strict father morality, which we've talked about at length here now, but why it's so stupid, is just upholding the system itself. So his argument throughout this whole thing is whatever upholds the current system, your moral system, is good. If it goes against the system, you don't even have to think about it because it's just this checks and balance, or not checks and balances, but the credit and debit sort of deal. If it's against this, that's a negative. If it's for this, that's a positive. Just comparing it to a blank set of rules, that's bad. But the liberals, on the other hand, their main rule is empathy. Put yourself in the other person's shoes, turn the other cheek, if you will. Really love your neighbor as yourself. Oh, wait, those are Christian ideas that I'm thinking of. Hold on. That's really weird that I've got these things mixed up here. But he says, because it's empathy, because it's based on understanding, because it's based on loving and respecting your neighbor, therefore it's intrinsically a better system because it's always going to look out for the other person and for the smaller people in society, just as Jesus taught. Right. That's a Christian guy. I forget about that's what Christian morality is really about. But again, it's just this horrible lying that he's doing, where he's just painting this horrible picture of conservatives evil, liberals good, and therefore being liberal is right.
Yes.
That's what the whole book has been.
Yeah. And I would say the other, and that's an excellent point about this last chapter, the other point is that, in my opinion, he's really articulating a form of utilitarianism. He asserts this on 380, where he says, it restates, he said this before, we are better off if we are rich rather than poor, healthy rather than sick, strong rather than weak, whole rather than deteriorating, cared for rather than not cared for, etc. States of well-being include health, wealth, strength, wholeness, nurturance, and so on. And then he draws from that, midway through the next paragraph, what is moral is what promotes experiential well-being in others. So if it feels good, that is good. It's like we're trying to improve the physical well-being of each. That's what is morality.
Yeah.
And it's nothing about spiritual benefit. And he doesn't understand the concept of delayed gratification for that reason.
Yeah.
Because if people are suffering for a period of time, like a child having to suffer a punishment before they get a reward, or suffering work before they get a reward, he doesn't understand that concept as being an appropriate concept. He doesn't understand any sort of morality beyond the physical realm.
Yeah, he's so just like aggressively materialist.
Yes,
it's crazy.
And he just asserts that as the truth.
And he's so materialist that he can't even comprehend other systems not being material, because he's describing the Christian system, which is so much more than just what is physically here on earth. He's describing that as if this material system is the basis for that. So he clearly just does not understand, or is unwilling to really understand or truthfully describe Christianity, which is really about, salvation and eternal life outside of the physical world.
Right.
And he just doesn't care, or is just ignorant.
He doesn't. He's like, a lot of utilitarians don't realize that a purely utilitarian or materialistic philosophy ends up breeding misery and destruction to the world. You need to have some higher ideal that people are pursuing in order to justify essentially sacrificing your own time and your own wealth for the benefit of others. I mean, that's because otherwise you'd have to figure out how to define what you're, like, if we're better off, we're rich rather than the poor. Isn't he articulating it better to be for me to be rich rather than less rich?
Yeah.
And it's not. So he's articulating a materialism, but he's saying that materialistic philosophy somehow will cause us all to want to spread that joy to others. But why would we do that?
Yeah.
And why would we care for another?
He definitely, I mean, this seems a lot to me like a lot of the people who think that we've like evolved morality in a way that like through over time we just associated good feelings with these good deeds that we could do, and therefore like essentially just exactly what he's saying.
Right.
And if we complete actions that make us feel good about ourselves, then we're going to keep doing those, and eventually we'll come up with a moral system. We feel good when we're healthy, so we'll do things that make us healthy. But you can't evolve like selflessness like this. I don't think you can really evolve based on material conditions. An idea of turn the other cheek, right? That makes no sense for like the survival of a species. What a lot of these people believe, and it's just, it doesn't make any sense that this is what he thinks morality is. It
kind of reminds me of the argument that Jordan Peterson makes that, and he may be an atheist as far as I know, because he won't articulate his belief in God one way or the other, but. It seems like his argument a lot of times is this is the best moral system to believe in for a just society, but he doesn't believe in it.
Yeah.
He won't articulate it that, maybe he does believe it, I don't know, but he won't say you should be a believer and also there's a benefit to it. He says it's almost like we should pretend, and we should at least pretend that this is the right moral system for a functioning just society, which I think they're right in the sense that you can't have a republic that values individual rights and individual freedom, free speech and all that. You can't have a functioning republic like the United States was and hopefully is and will continue to be without that Judeo-Christian, mostly Christian morality view of the world that believes that we're all made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And we're all little saints running around.
Yeah, well
potential at least.
Jordan Peterson, I've been, watching his whole Genesis series, which is, a lot of hours of getting and just scanning papers. But, one of the things he keeps bringing up, and one of the things that I think makes him far superior to George Lakoff. I mean, Peterson is still very much, I think, still like in a materialist sort of camp where he's like much more psychologically focused. We must have evolved these things over time, kind of similar to that. But he is very clear, and he repeats many times throughout these lectures, there are things that we can't explain. There are things that are mysteries, that really seem, kind of, he doesn't ever use the word, or maybe he does use the word supernatural, but something beyond the physical world.
The known physical world.
Yeah, that we just can't explain. But Lakoff just dismisses all of that. He says, I could just describe all of morality based on these material conditions.
Right.
There's a very big difference between the two. I mean, just in the
Oh
humility.
yeah,
there.
yeah. I'm just.
Oh yeah. I'm not saying that you're equating them. I'm just
Right.
saying I respect Jordan Peterson a lot more for that.
Yes.
In that regard.
But it's kind of a similar argument when you're just trying to talk about, well, if you have these ideals, they're great for society. Well, what's the reason for the ideals? Well, you have some sort of moral system behind it.
Yeah.
He's articulating a moral system that actually undermines what makes his version. Like, you can't have a nurturant parent. Let's maybe end towards this thought, because I think it's brilliant. Because it's mine.
Yes, of course.
You can't have a nurturant parent model without having the authoritative parent being the system being dominant. Because because you have, it's like the phrase that says, weak times make strong men make good times make weak men,
yeah.
right? Weak men make bad times.
Yeah.
No,
Weak men make hard times. Hard times make strong men. Strong men make good times.
Yeah, good times make
weak men.
Yeah. So you have it's like an indulgence.
Yeah.
Like where you can only have this type. You can only allow this type of parenting model if everybody else has a more structured and disciplined family.
Yeah.
Because you're letting these kids run around. Great. Oh, give me a hug. Don't smack Jimmy. Come here. Oh, you sad? Now I'll give you a hug. But Jimmy's parents are like, don't hit him or you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason why Jimmy's not kicking little Johnny's butt for getting smacked. Like, so if you don't have, I think that the Christian conservative value system has to be dominant in order to allow the left-wing family model to even exist.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they won't survive.
Well, that's what I see with a lot of people who are atheists who say, I can be atheist and still be moral, and yet they describe their moral system. They're describing a Christian system because that's what's been accepted by society. I still know that it's good, to take care of my friends. I still know that it's good to help the poor and things like that. Well, yeah, because the culture that you're in has promoted those things for generations because it's based on this Christian system.
That's right.
Right, and they just can't seem to understand that the reason that they think these things are good is because they've been in that system.
Yes.
They've been taught and raised, and
at
least up until recently, there's the majority of the people around them believe in that more firmly than they do.
Well, what they're doing is they're looking at the immediate benefit or immediate result without looking at the cause. Which is a religious based value system. If we're all a bunch of atheists running around, it ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
It's just going to be chaos.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the strongest shall prevail. Because why not?
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about anything.
He then does have an epilogue here, and this is.
I didn't read them.
Yeah, that's fair.
I must confess, I'm not going to read them.
This is surprisingly the one place in the book where I agreed with him, and I think he actually made good points.
When he said the end?
Well, he's bemoaning conservative media, of course, and so he thinks that all the media is conservative and has this right wing bent.
Yes,
and he says that there are very big issues with how people treat the media, and people assume that the media is being neutral in everything. He says, first, news reporting assumes that concepts are literal, nonpartisan, but concepts and language that expresses them are typically partisan. They're going to embody certain things if you're using the language of something. That's the second point. It's assumed that the use of language is neutral, that words are just arbitrary labels for literal ideas. But he says language is associated with a conceptual system. And I think that's right. If you're using the language of a different system, you're going to be promoting that system in a way.
Yes.
He says news reporting is issue-oriented, but political issues are rarely, if ever, isolatable from their moral matrix. You know, it's always within a deeper system.
Yes.
Fourth, this is a weird one. The very concept of a traditional debate is at odds with the thesis of this book, because you need to be talking about big picture, I guess, moral frameworks rather than specific issues. That one was weird. But then he says, you know, it's not always possible to report a story in neutral terms. You're always going to be using the language that you believe in, the language that you use in your system. And then he says, you know, language itself can put people in a discussion at a disadvantage. You know, if you're using a language that sort of assume some concepts to be true, you're going to be putting someone else at a disadvantage. I mean, I think this is especially true now for like the gender stuff. You know,
Yes.
if you're using these, you know, words about genders, if they're true, then you're going to be automatically assuming that these theories are true and stuff like that.
Well, the same as the opposite point of view is true, is accurate too, because if you believe that there are only two sexes, you know, and you're talking in that manner,
Yeah.
you're refuting the illogical and beliefs of the other side.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then, of course, he has to work in a really stupid point. He says, the very nature of political discourse makes it difficult to discuss the relationship of morality and politics at all. The separation of church and state has implicitly left the church as the institution that is seen as guarding morality. Morality is too important to be left to churches, is the point he makes.
That's a common. I've heard that before.
Yeah.
I don't think he coined that phrase.
No, probably not. But essentially saying that, you know, we need to just bring morality to the forefront in conversations, and not just, you know, in theological settings, but also in political. And I think, you know, he's right about that. He's coming at it at a stupid direction.
Yes.
But yeah, that's what he says, that there's problems with implementing this because, you know, in our language and our public discourse, we're automatically using concepts, we're framing things in a way that are going to assert our own worldviews. And I think that is really the only good point he's made throughout this whole book, and he leaves it for the epilogue.
Everybody already knows that.
Well, yeah, but it's still, I want to give him some credit here at the end.
Yes. Well, when you're hungry, you want to eat. And so maybe I should write a book about why people eat when they're hungry.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he's that's what he's saying. I'm making an obvious point, but I don't know why we're giving him credit for that.
Yeah.
Stating the
That's
obvious.
Fair. Well, I mean, I think a lot of people, well, I mean, not anymore, but I think if you go back, you know, maybe 20 years ago, I think there was a greater belief that the media was neutral and that the stories presented to us were neutral. 'Cause, I mean, it's like the idea of, you know, that the government, you know, like the Josh Hammer, you know, the lie of values neutrality. You know, the government and institutions can never really be neutral.
True. Well, yes, and I think you're right that it's spread, and I think that has really accelerated, especially in 2016 when Trump got elected and the media actually said out loud, we aren't going to be neutral on him. We can't be neutral because Orange Man bad. And so I think that opened up a lot of eyes that weren't seeing it. And now, you know, of course, I've always been suspicious of the news media, frustrated by them, but even I mean, it's like, well, there's a common saying now, like on Twitters or X, you don't hate the media enough.
Yeah.
And they'll have a clip of some terribly biased story about some innocent person somewhere. They're just defaming them. And the caption will be, we don't hate the media enough. And there's some truth to that. Although we're not supposed to hate people, you know, but whatever. Well, the point is, yeah, they're just so dishonest. We can't give them the respect that they used to have. But I think they used to be more, I honestly think that they were more honest about things.
Yeah.
And part of it, I think, is cultural, because you used to have working class reporters. They were always of the working class in my youth. You know, now they're all, because they didn't pay worth crap. And it was like these stereotypical guys, because they'd start them out on the police beat. So they worked the night shift.
Yeah.
Especially in the major metropolitan newspapers. And you weren't really, TV became more of an entertainment. But TV news, those people were print journalists originally way back when, like the good-looking print journalists. So you could look at them on TV. But they would start them out as a young reporter and working the night shift, talking to the cops and cab drivers and witnesses to murders. And you get out there and you meet people.
Yeah.
And if you were some college kid, you got a quick education in the so-called underclass by just talking to people in the working class about these various events, and then you deal with the city council meetings, and you meet those local corrupt politicians that will lie to your face, and you realize as you go up the ladder and you're dealing with Congress people and senators and the presidents, they're no different.
Yeah.
You know, they're just regular people with more power. And so they tended to be more cynical, and also they wrote better.
Yeah.
They were better writers than these functionally illiterate dimwits that are in our news media.
Yeah.
And
now
that actually speaks to a lot of the people on the right, too. It's like, oh, God.
Yeah, no, you're right. Because I think now a lot of articles, even when they claim to just be, we're presenting the facts, they're all just op-eds.
Yes,
right. I mean,
it
really is just the opinions of whatever journalist is writing. So they're always going to put some sort of spin on whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, but I bemoan our current media, but that's a whole different podcast. We have to figure out our next chapter.
We do. Well, that has been
next book.
Yeah, George Lakoff, Moral Politics. Do you have any other final thoughts on this book?
No.
Yeah, neither do I. I think we've talked about it enough. Yeah. That was miserable. Definitely our worst book of the podcast, 100%.
Sure. Yes.
Well, this has been... shoot us some suggestions on Twitter.
I have an idea.
Like. Yeah, what's your idea?
I don't know if I want to follow through this idea.
Okay.
But I was
it's your picks. I think I've picked like the last 3.
That is true.
And this one sucked.
So I don't know if this would work, but I was thinking something along the lines of... and I don't know how timely it would be now, but Victor Davis Hanson's The Case for Trump, which he wrote at the 2020 election, and it was a more intellectual analysis of his record for arguing for his reelection, which I thought was I read it and I thought it was really good because when Trump was elected, he wasn't really thought of as... I mean, what was his philosophy? Who knows?
Yeah.
But when he put it into practice, he has a specific now. You can articulate a foreign policy for sure. His domestic policy is a little bit mixed from an intellectual perspective, but I think it's starting to come into focus. Mm-hmm. Mainly tax reform, bureaucracy reform, and low taxes and higher efficiency, that kind of stuff in development. But anyway, the case for Trump is kind of an interesting look at that. I thought, well, that'd be kind of interesting to go back through that one chapter by chapter and see if it's still valid, what we think of those intellectual reasons. But I was just kind of an off thought today.
Yeah, that's something to think about.
But maybe we'll come up with something a little bit less topical, maybe. I don't know, more philosophical.
I could always do a Twitter poll for
our listener
ones of followers on Twitter, if we have a few suggestions, and let them pick, or whoever stumbles across it as they're scrolling through Twitter. But yeah, I don't have any particular ideas. Something that isn't written by George Lakoff is my opinion. It is sad because I think he really does give linguists a bad rap with this book.
This is the closest I've come into actually setting a book on fire. It's literally really book burning.
Yeah, it's bad.
Which I'm against.
It's bad. Well, this has been Season 8, Episode 14, the season finale of Season 8. So I guess we'll take a break for a week, as we usually do, as we get our next book in
contemplate
order.
Our next plan.
But yeah, feel free to tweet us suggestions at ULMTD Opinions. Follow us there, see if we'll put out a poll or something like that. Mm-hmm. But let us know what you think we should read next, what you'd be interested in having our thoughts on for next season, for Season 9. All right, well, I've been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
And this has been Unlimited Opinions.
Good job, Mr. Adams.
Thank you. Bad job, Mr. Lakoff.